Hello, hello. I've got James Coons, the host of Modern Day Debate, with me this morning. How you doing, James?
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. I don't even know if we're live. If you guys put something in the comments, because I can't switch over to the other screen and see if we're live. I'm just watching the comments over here on the side. Wow. Okay. It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
It has. That's right.
How long do you figure? At least 2 years.
Yeah, you're one of the earliest people I got to interact with and host like on Modern Day Debate. But by the way, thanks for always coming on. It's always fun to have you. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Um, this was back when the show was called Modern Day Hysteria. Now, not to embarrass you too much, but I think, now tell me if I'm wrong. I think your show was called Modern Day Hysteria to kind of point a little mocking finger at non-believers. And I think that I think you called it Modern Day Hysteria because you thought non-believers were just ridiculous, and you had non-believers on originally kind of just to show the world, hey, look at what these people, look at all the crazy things they believe. When I came on with who was General Han Solo? What's his real name? Robert Rowe.
Oh,
What was his
Robert
name?
Rowe. That's right.
Yeah, General Han Solo. Remember? And he and I discussed the 26 the 26 times in the Bible that the Trinity appears, and we argued about that a little bit. And I think that I'm going to take at least partial credit for the reason you all changed your name to something less provocative, Modern Day Debate, is because I think myself and other non-believers like me were so amicable and good-natured that you said, I don't want to attack them as much, and so am I at least partly responsible for the name change?
Actually, though, I for sure agree in terms of you being amicable, as well as the almost every person we usually have is pleasant, and including whether it be atheist or Christian. And actually, I'm so surprised to learn that that's how the title was interpreted. It was never anything at all meant to be about unbelievers. It was actually, I purposely picked hysteria just because I figured it would be a way in which we could focus in on like the kind of controversial or like juicy things that were being talked about nowadays. And it was sufficiently broad such that I didn't have to decide the narrow focus of the channel right away. But there's no doubt about it. You were always a pleasant fellow that I was thankful to have among many other atheists that were always pleasant.
Well, damn, I thought I was partly responsible, but I understand. This whole time I was thinking that was the case, so I'm glad you cleared that up. Let's address what's on the screen right now, because more than one person, Jim Majors, and now this person, Mr. P. So what is the backstory with this? You and Jim Majors calling each other a beta? I think there's like some running joke.
Yeah, it's more of an ironic, we don't really seriously use the term. I think everybody nowadays that uses it is using it ironically. And it's definitely originally mostly from Jesse Lee Peterson that we had heard popularizing it. And then it kind of spread from there. Same thing with the jokes about loving soy. So, yes.
I get it now. All right. Now, Jesse Lee Peterson, he might be one of the only ones that says it unironically, I believe, but
It might be. That's actually a good
guy's
point.
a character. Okay, well, last time we talked, our channels were pretty much the same. In fact, I think I was bigger. And now here you are sitting atop the mountain. What do you attribute to your fast growth of your channel?
That's nice of you to say. I really, no joke, think that it's a combination of the debaters as well as the audience, in that the debaters are the lifeblood of the channel. I've always said that. And for people to, if they had to listen to me debate every night, they wouldn't come back. But with the debaters as well as the audience, in terms of the audience giving ideas and saying, hey, this would be a fun topic, or even things like a lot of times the audience, people who are like, they'll email and they'll say, hey, James, like this is so-and-so, and they'd love to come on and debate. And so it has been a true community effort. And I've just tried, I'm not always great at it, but I've tried to listen in terms of, I'm always looking at the YouTube Creator Studio stats. And I'm just constantly looking at things like average watch time, views, and click-through rates. And so usually that gives a pretty decent patterns, you could say, in terms of what people are voting for with their feet. And so that's the long story short of it. I'm just trying to listen if I can.
So that is interesting. So you're at a point now where you're not really having to put the feelers out too often, that you're getting a lot of people wanting to come on the show. They're reaching out to you instead of the reverse. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
kind of
definitely.
that's a time saver. And you can be a little selective instead of reaching out and then hoping if you get any feedback or anyone responds to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like really thankful that it's pretty much daily, sometimes maybe more than once a day, because Twitter, I get DMs too of people saying, "Hey, I'd love to come on." And it's just, I think for some people, they don't even have a channel. They just love to debate. And I feel like debate is kind of therapeutic. Like it just kind of gets your mind off things. It's really engaging for a lot of people, for me, for sure. And then the other thing is, a lot of people, if they're starting like a new channel, they're like, "Hey, like, they love for people to hear about it." And we always link our guests in the description, just because that, yeah, well, anyway, that's the short story of it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, James. A good segue. I like to put the plugs at the top of the show. So, if for the couple of people that don't know about your channel, talk about it a little bit and where they can find you and what else are you working on and any upcoming debates that you've already got planned.
Thanks for asking. It we have this coming Wednesday, Jesse Lee Peterson's buddy James Hake will be debating Brenton Langle on whether or not Black Lives Matter has done more good than harm. So it's true, we host some controversial debates. That's one of them. And that's going to be this Wednesday night. This Tuesday night, we have one on whether or not assisted suicide is good or bad. And so that's another controversial one. But yeah, I see the comment. Tom Jump is indeed a good debater. That's for sure. We used to have some debates that you can still find on Modern Day Debate. Tom's been a good friend. Tom has actually been. I hate to forgive me for sidetracking, but since he came up, I have to say that
Yeah.
Tom has been another huge kind of part of that community that's helped Modern Day Debate grow, because people enjoy listening to Tom. So
I'm sure this guy's joking because you guys are
it's
good friends, and he's been on the show numerous times. I think you've been on his show as well. No, maybe not. Have you been on Tom's
Oh,
channel?
let me think about that.
That's a
Well,
good
I would
question.
say back when if you count like our old debates, when we had like two or three discussions, but yeah, that's the running joke, is we Tom and I tease each other about having lost, but yeah.
Um, Now it's your show originally when it was Modern Day Hysteria. It wasn't just debates. It kind of was a little more eclectic. Now it's just debates. Do you feel like did you pigeonhole yourself? Do you wish that you would have kind of remained more variety oriented to where you could reach out and do some other things creatively, or would you just start another channel for that now?
That's a great question. The only thing that I might change in the future with regard to that is we might at some point shift to where we have interviews. And the reason being that it's easier to get a speaker for an interview than for a debate. And so, for example, like if I wanted to have on, let's say we reached out to someone big, Cenk Uygur, or Jordan Peterson. Sorry, Jordan Peterson's the name, right? But if we reached out to them for a debate, they'd probably say, well, I want a good size honorarium. But if we asked for an interview, that would be easier. So maybe if we did like a 2-person interview, that could work. But we definitely won't ever have any videos that are like arguing for a particular case. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that would be incongruent with our style so far.
Yeah, for the small channels, I would like to think that if I were as big as Sam Harris, I wouldn't charge little channels. If I had a little spare time, I would help them out a little. I'd come on the small shows because it's all about, and I say this all the time. Holy Kool-Aid, Thomas Westbrook came to our studio way early in the development of the show, right? It was around the holidays. And he sat right here and he gave me so many tips, and he didn't have to do that. And he's the first one that said a rising tide raises all the ships, and I've held to that. So no matter, we're only what 8,000 subscribers, so we're not huge, but if someone's got less than 1,000 and they need some help, man, we're always there looking out for it. It's a win-win. You never lose by helping out someone that's where was in your position at one time. So I'm not going to say it on air, but I'm not going to pay the honorarium that Sam Harris wanted for 30 minutes with him. So there's just no way. Even if I was big, I think I would just not do it out of principle. And
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman's another one. He didn't ask for an honorarium, but he just seems to be always busy, which he is. He's busy, and I can't knock him for that. But I just wonder if you could be a little bit reachable sometimes, especially a show like yours.
Well, yeah, a couple things. One is it's funny that you mentioned I can't help but wonder if sometimes I wonder if I'm really, really busy is code for offer me a huge honorarium because, and not necessarily huge, but the reason I say that is just that there are some speakers where I would have difficulty getting a hold of them. And if I say like, hey, I'm like, I think it over and I'm like, well, is this worth an honorarium? Would they bring enough new people to the channel? And then, if I make an offer where we did some, for example, our crowd funds where, we offered Michael Shermer $1,000, and that was thankfully raised by all the people that put into the crowd fund, and he was much more likely to come. And I don't blame him. Like I don't have any hard feelings. But anyway, it's interesting that I'm like, maybe that is code. But anyway, also I was going to say your channel, Jim, is a success. And that one, I heard an interesting stat that if you have over 100 subscribers, you're in the top 1% of YouTube channels. I think that's probably true because, the vast majority of people, they never upload content. They have an account or a channel, but they, maybe they put on 2 videos. And so they have like 4 subscribers. And so I don't know for sure if that figure is true, but I actually suspect it is. I've heard similar stats about like Twitch or OnlyFans that if you have just, a couple hundred followers, you're in like the top half of a percentage point or something. Long story short, your channel is done really well. 8,000 is very respectable. The first 1,000 is always the hardest. I'm guessing you experienced that too.
Well, the first 100, for those that are watching that are wanting to start a channel or are still under 100, that is definitely the biggest milestone. Once you hit 100, it seems like things start working for you, but you have to stay at it. I don't know if this was the case for you. Once you hit 1,000 is the next big milestone. After that, it almost took on a life of its own. And
Right.
we plateaued at 7,500 where we're at now, and we've been that way for a year and a half. I don't see us ever getting 10,000. I think we're at a plateau, which is fine. 8,000 fine. I'm good with that. But just to go back to, anyway, everyone's saying tofu, your predilection for tofu. And I guess this was a joke that I was unaware of. Was it just you and Jim Majors, or is that how it started?
Oh, it's it probably started. I know Jim and I used to use it and tease each other, and it's been around for a while now. The old like soy boy joke, and which I don't have anything against people who like soy, but I can't even remember where that came from because I don't think Jesse Lee Peterson calls people soy boy. I think it was just something. I think it was on like an episode of It's Always Sunny or something. But yeah.
Well, I've been a vegetarian almost 9 years, and there was a time, maybe a year, maybe a 2-year period there where I didn't research enough, and I heard enough about soy that it scared me that it does have natural estrogen. And so I weaned myself off of soy for like a year or two while I was a vegetarian, thinking that it was going to affect me negatively, health wise, like give me boobs or make me cry during rom-coms or something. But it turns out after I did a little more research, the amount you would have to eat about a wheelbarrow full a day of edamame or soybeans to actually affect a male. So yes, there is natural estrogen in it. It's not enough to mess you up. So for anyone that thinks that.
That's interesting. I hadn't read about that. That's fascinating.
Oh, that's another. I don't know. I'm not trying to get my foot in the door to come back on your show. But if you wanted to, I don't know how many vegetarian friends you have. So I would love to talk about that, or electronic surveillance. or I don't know, maybe YouTubing or something.
I'm totally open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What Before I ask about future events, let me ask about past events. What are some of the debates previously that you've hosted, moderated, that didn't go the way you want? They were controversial, not controversial. They ended bad. The two parties, the debaters, had bad faith. They were at each other's throats. They didn't get their points across, and it just ended badly. Any Did that ever happen?
That's a great question. I feel like my standards are lower than a lot of people's because I'm usually, it's really rare that I think someone is being nasty. And I guess it's maybe because I just kind of expect that people are, it's, going to be kind of feisty, or sometimes people are going to be, there's a lot of pride involved, or even if you are shown to be wrong, you're going to try to save face a lot of the time. And so it's really difficult to think of anyone in particular. I think, it comes in degrees. Some debates have it for sure more than others. And but it's honestly, it's really, I know that there are some where, if it gets nasty, where people say personal things that are mean, that's a turn off for me, where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have them come back. And so sometimes they'll apologize. And I really do want to, assuming it's sincere, take it seriously. And you could say, like, I want there to be a route for redemption to where they're welcome back and reformed. But long story short, some of the controversial ones, I can tell you one controversial one I didn't know what I was getting into was these, I think they're like alt-right types. And I think their names are, if I remember, like Enoch and Stryker, I think were the guys. Brenton Langle. I'll blame Brenton. He said, "Hey, is it okay if we have a debate on," I think it was like fascism versus nationalism. And which I think I'm new, I'm pretty frankly new to like what a lot of these terms mean, especially like, is nationalism is it synonymous white, you know, and white type, national, etc. So that I had no idea that there were going to be so many people that would come to our channel and still sometimes try to raid the live chat with things that are just terrible, and that we ban them, obviously. But some of these people, I think they purposely try to organize themselves to simultaneously come into the live chat and say all the worst things they possibly can, because it overwhelms the moderators. It's hard for the moderators to keep up. And the moderators, they do a fantastic job, but it's way more difficult when you have people that are systematically trying to organize in an organized way, trying to raid your chat. So that, I obviously don't like having that in the chat. I do actually like having some of these types of views on, because my hope is that the audiences of those ALT right types will, I'm just trying to not get you, not have YouTube pick up on any words that are controversial, but I want them to have their audiences. I want their audiences to be exposed to refutations as a means of hopefully trying to bring them out of it. And so the ones I've hosted, I think that the opposing side has done well. And I do try to, I'm more careful about not having a mismatch. I don't want someone who's less gifted in debate taking on someone who is experienced in debate and has ALT right positions, because that, I want someone who's going to give good arguments against it.
You bring up a great point. As someone who's running the channel also, I mean, we have to be aware of the comments, and staying within the terms of service of YouTube. And at the same time, there's two avenues that a show like ours could go down. We could just block everyone, all opposing viewpoints, and just stay with what we believe, or we could allow the opposing viewpoints in, expose them with sunlight, like I always like to say. It's a great it's not the best disinfectant. There's lots of other better ones, if to be completely accurate. But I believe sunlight's a great disinfectant. Sometimes get the opposing viewpoints. Now, when it approaches, of course, inciting violence, like true hate speech. Hate speech, by the way, it's against terms of service for YouTube, but it is not against the law. People sometimes think it's against the law. it's totally legal for someone to be completely racist or homophobic. So there's a distinction there. But yeah, that's a good point. When your channel gets bombarded by um, the extremist right, or maybe even the extremist left, I think there's a personality bigger than us that doesn't do it on purpose, but will just mention just one tweet from Larry Elder or Ben Shapiro right before your show could completely derail your debate.
It is true that the chat is an important component of the channel. And so for us, banning everything that is against the terms of service, especially like the stuff that's like, it's not meant to be an argument. It's just meant to hurt someone, or it's trying to like make someone feel unwelcome. It's like, it's antithetical to our channel. And when I sometimes see people say, well, I thought modern day debate was about free speech. I'm like, well, we're about free speech, like as a country, like you can say what you want, but I mean, like, we also have to be practical and prudent in terms of following YouTube's terms of service. And so both in the sense of like, you could say self-preservation, because they've helped us in the algorithm, but also because, like I said, originally, some of this is like, you're trying to like alienate people or make them leave. And that's not at all what we want, because we always constantly talk about being a melting pot. And so, yeah, it's like, it's amazing what people are out there. I think they've let life's hard knocks get to them. And I think that's a choice, or you don't have to become miserable and nasty when you have bad experiences. I suspect maybe that's part of it. They let it make them become nasty. So I'm
I
not
always
sure.
wonder what percentage of the people like that are just being deliberately provocative. They don't even believe what they're saying. Sometimes it almost feels like that. Like we call them pose, people that pretend to be Christian and they're actually atheists, and they just want to they want to flame everyone up. They're
Oh
called
yeah.
pose, POE.
Oh, I appreciate your honesty. That's a big, I don't know for sure who would be a Poe in our chat. I'm sure there are probably some people that pretend to be each side to try to. So I appreciate your transparency with that. Not that like, yeah. So we're on the same page about that it happens, and it's a bizarre world. Like, I remember
Yeah,
when I first heard of the idea of that, I was like, really? Like
I know.
people like so.
Like I think normal people like us and like the majority of people could not fathom the idea of just coming in to make people's lives. Why would you want to make someone's life that you don't even know across the other side of the planet miserable that day? You got out of bed saying, I'm going to make people miserable. I never understood that. Now, if I say something that's going to offend somebody and it's a deeply held belief of mine, I'm not trying to offend you. If you got offended, that's on you. Offense can only be taken, it can never be given. That's how I
Mm,
look at it. But I
right.
don't do it on purpose just to offend people.
Agreed. Yeah, it is bizarre. It's a strange world. I guess maybe it's their way of filling bored hours. I don't know, but
To switch gears, or did you read something in the chat?
no,
So
no.
there's some funny things.
I was just thinking about those people, and I'm exhausted thinking about them, because
Oh
it's
yeah.
a common challenge at our channel. Our chat is sometimes, we try to allow a lot of flexibility because we don't want people feeling like they're walking on eggshells. But the balance that we're walking is that there's so many different things, so many reasons why we also want the chat to be regulated. So.
For anyone that just showed up, this is James Coons, the host of Modern Day Debate. You'll find a link to his channel in the description section. Earlier, James, you were talking about you closely monitor your analytics on, I guess, Social Blade and on the analytics section of the YouTube studio. Um, what do you really value search engine optimization, and do you do a lot of marketing, or what would you say is the underlying success of the show outside of course, getting big names on?
Yeah, that's kind of you to say. In addition to the things I mentioned in terms of like the chat, like the community that's helped, and the debaters, I do think thumbnails and titles are like absolutely important. concise thumbnails that get the point across quick and that are ideally concrete, and or what titles is what I meant to say. I don't know if I said titles or thumbnails. Thumbnails, the greatest kind of thumbnail, I think, tells a story, and ours don't often tell a story. They're usually just a picture of two different people, and that's fine. I think it works, and it makes it click quickly when people look at it because they see the word debate in the title or something. But we did used to do ads to try to build the platform. They kind of have a declining marginal utility because eventually a lot of people, they've heard about you already anyway, so they've already decided. So we don't really do ads anymore unless we have like a big, like I think last time we did it, it was like maybe Michael Shermer. So I don't think that helps. Maybe it helps at the start when people haven't heard as much, but I think that probably even bigger would be the topics. Science, the intersection of science and stuff that's kind of out there in terms of supernatural, whether it be supernatural like ghosts or science intersecting with out there like flat Earth. I'm surprised. I never would have thought that those would have been the topics that are the most popular, and yet I think that they're the most popular topic on the channel. And so I never really intended to go hard in that route. I was always focused on like, does God exist type stuff, but the topics of science and the kind of the clash of what a lot of people would call unscientific views or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to be biased in how I present it, but those have become, they've helped us grow a lot. So yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Michael Shermer. The only debate, in-person debate that I've actually gone to go see that I believe, of all the debates I've seen, the one that was the most lopsided, the atheist was the loser. And the fact that I admit that, I think lends some credibility to me that, that I can be that open-minded about it and that, intellectually honest. But I went to see a Michael Shermer debate. Who was it? John Mark Reynolds. And I think it was a broad topic, like some does God exist type of topic. And it was in Fort Worth at a Baptist university. And Michael Shermer just came completely unprepared. And it was just funny to watch. In line with that, what is the most lopsided debate you've ever had on your channel?
That's a great question. I appreciate your candor, because one thing that, and I'll come right back to this question, but I have to say I just appreciate your honesty in saying and admitting that a person from your position ever lost a debate, because I am both Christians and atheists, or Republicans, Democrats, you name it. I do find that like almost all groups, oftentimes they have like a reluctance to admit anybody on their side has ever lost a debate, which is, to me, I'm like, it's a little discouraging, because I'm like, really? I mean, for example, we didn't host it, but William Lane Craig, when he debated Shelley Kagan on ethics, Craig didn't win, and maybe at best he tied, but he probably maybe lost that debate. And I think Craig is a great debater. I'm not trying to like rag on him. The reason I bring it up is I think he usually wins most of his debates. But that debate, there's just no way he won. And so I appreciate, though, when people can admit that their side doesn't always win. But long story short, I think I hate to, but last January we hosted a debate between Mike Jones and Mike Shermer, and Mike Jones is a very good debater. He does a lot of prep, which I think is at least half the battle. And some guys don't prep. And you kind of see that in the debate, because I think that Mike Jones had a much stronger case than Dr. Shermer was expecting. And at the same time, I'm trying to think of maybe where there's one where, like one in particular that I can think of in which a Christian lost to an atheist. To be honest, I think they happen plenty of the time, and I think that there are different reasons for that. But I would concede that it's not uncommon; like it happens, and so it's hard to think of a particular one. But I guess the reason that the Shermer one sticks out in my mind is just because we expected it to be a little closer.
The one time that sticks out in my mind where the Christian pretty much lost. It didn't start out as a debate per se. It was an in-person discussion. It was an atheist and Christian book club discussion. Actually, the half the room was atheist, half was Christian. We were discussing Frank Turek was with us. He joined us, and we were talking about his book. And my former co-host at the time, Chris, for those of you that remember Chris from way back, got into this heated thing with Frank Turek and just pretty much put him in his place. And it was crazy, the fact that this is being filmed and this is Chris, and little known guy, just going toe to toe with the probably, arguably the most, the most popular apologist on the planet, and then not only holding his own, but just kind of, I dare say, he caught him flat-footed. And in Frank Turek's defense, he didn't come to debate, and he had just got off a big speaking gig that, he came after a speaking gig, and he came to this as an afterthought. But this is from Stitix. I don't know if you're taking questions or if this has been covered already, but I'll ask just in case. James is obviously the face of modern day debate. How many people are actually on the team and crew, or is it just you?
It's kind of like a malleable, if you want to call it, organization. This kind of like transitory group. And what I mean by that is some people have been helping us since the start, like moderators, and a lot of the moderators have been around for like 2.5, maybe 3 years even. And I would say a lot of the people, in terms of like people who are like, hey, you should have this person on, they'd be great. Or, hey, I'm willing to moderate, which is way more rare. Very few people want to moderate. Almost everybody wants to debate, and I don't blame them. But long story short, one would be like John Singleton. If people remember John, he was with us for maybe 6 months I think at most. And he was like a debater and a host, and he was great. And then just kind of was like, it's like, I'm just kind of looking for other things now. And so I would say nobody else is officially part of like modern day debate staff, or if you want to call it that. It's more that like there are people that kind of just on our journey temporarily are like working to help, and then oftentimes they're like, oh, like I'm not as into debate anymore, and I'm looking more at this now. And I can't blame them. I'm just thankful that they helped us at all. So I never have an entitled feeling that they have to keep helping. I'm just thankful that they were there at all. So
the very first time I was on your show, back when it was Modern Day Hysteria, and it was Robert Rowe, General Han Solo, I was so naive. First off, I didn't do any homework. Second, I thought it was just going to be a discussion. Third, I had no idea it was going to be billed as a debate. Not that you ambushed me. I just didn't know. I probably didn't look into it enough. I didn't even go and look at the upcoming event. I should have. But all I knew about the Trinity was that the mere concept of the Trinity only appears twice in the Bible, as far as I knew, and at least one of those was an interpolation, a complete forgery. And that's all I knew. And I went into this 2-hour or hour plus debate with somebody who took me line by line. Now that time has made me a little more prepared, and the 26, what he believes, the 26 references to the Trinity in the Bible, 80-90% of those are dubious at best. But I think I would be more prepared now. But yeah, now that your show, everyone knows your show. When they come on the show, they know what the score is. There is no, I'm getting caught off guard. People know what they're in for.
I'm so sorry, Jim, that I did that. I if you can trust me that it was never meant to be deceptive.
No.
It was probably at first, and I appreciate your benefit of the doubt. When I first started, that's a good point, that now the channel's been around, so people have probably been exposed to it at some point and see like what it's like. And the other thing is, there's definitely a learning curve in terms of like, now when I reach out, I almost always use debate in the email. And so there's a learning curve in terms of like back then I probably wasn't doing a good job of being super clear. So I appreciate your patience with me on that, and I'm so sorry.
No, James, listen, it's really it, first, well, the main thing is I don't mind being wrong. I think that that is a quality that is kind of a minority in this community, the YouTube community that talks theology in general, both sides. I think admitting you're wrong and being willing to change your mind is a very minority position, and I think more of us need to do that. So, um, if me getting schooled by Robert Rowe on your channel helped people go and research it, mission accomplished, in my opinion.
That's nice of you to say. I appreciate your humility. I don't remember it being one-sided. I think like if I remember right, it was like more even-sided. And so I wouldn't I doubt people even think of it that way. That's at least not, I certainly don't have your memory of that, but I appreciate your humility. And I'm so sorry that, because I really think that the most underestimated thing is prepping for a debate. And so the fact that you came in, and I'm so sorry that it wasn't clear in terms of the expectations and knowing like how much and what to prep for exactly, that I just appreciate you being a good sport about it and not being salty.
It definitely wasn't an ambush, so nothing on you or the show. Um, and sometimes a debate can pop up out of the blue. We did Courtney and I, my co-host, we do speaking engagements. We do Ask an Atheist little talks at church, mega churches. We go in like on a Wednesday night and we just get in front of the crowd and with a microphone and, okay, have you ever met an atheist before? Look, we don't have horns growing out of our head. Ask us anything, and it turns into, and there's always at least one person in the crowd that kind of wants to push. They want to start some, they want to make some waves, and that's okay. We prepare for that. We're ready. But sometimes we do speaking events at Free Thought or humanist organizations where we're all pretty much on the same page of music. And so we're not thinking it's going to be a debate. And that it even happens once. I gave a talk to a Free Thought organization about. I firmly believe that the culture war was at least in part started by the atheist community. And I believe that it started in June of 2011 in Ireland, and it's a long story, and I can tell you why. If for those of you that want to go and do a Google search on Elevator Gate, I think that was a catalyst for a lot of the division in internal division and division with believers and the culture war. And I got a lot of pushback, and people in the audience, one in particular, pushed back and made me go, oh, okay. So what was happening right around 2011 also? The internet was getting, I mean, it was already around, but I mean, it grew to a point where, and she laid out her case as I'm giving my talk, why the internet was more responsible. And she made some great points. And you know what? That's fine. I like to see that. If I'm wrong, I want to know if I'm wrong.
That's super interesting. That's a juicy topic. But I appreciate that you're flexible and willing to, say like, yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that. It's admirable.
You, what's the next question of mine? I had it queued up. Future events. Who, if you could have anyone on the show, name 4 or 5 people that if you could have them on, you'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Maybe that might be out of reach or just barely out of reach at this point.
At the moment, it's not likely we'll have people like Cenk Uygur or Sam Cedar, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, like the people who are well known for like debate. Those would be epic people to host. I do think, like Lord willing, my goal is that we will get to host them in the future. It might be 5 years from now, and it might even be 10 years from now. It really, I do have those goals, and I'm fully committed to modern day debate. I love it, and I'm excited to. This has been a crazy summer. So anyway, long story short, I'm excited to get even more focused on modern day debate. But those would be the names, the biggest names. Steven Crowder would be another big name in terms of that would definitely put us on the map, so to speak, hosting, for example, like Crowder and Cedar, which we tried to do a crowd fund for.
Ooh, that would be fireworks. Have they
Boy.
ever engaged publicly? I don't know.
No, other than the little exchanges they've had that were not really true debates. So I mean, that's why it would be so special, is it's the one people have been anticipating for a long time now.
We were talking about provocateurs that just do it for the flame war and for the lulls. I think Crowder is one of them. I don't think Shapiro is, in contrast, but I think Steven Crowder is more and who's the gay guy who's anti-gay? Come on.
Oh,
He's
Milo
got a black
Yiannopoulos.
boyfriend.
I think that's Milo.
Milo Yiannopoulos. I think he's a showman also. I think some people are not 100% sincere. They do it for the lulls and for the notoriety. I don't know.
Being a provocateur works well. I don't know if it has the shelf life in the, for example, like Milo has. You at some point you jump the shark, as they say. It's like hard to top your provocative nature in the past, and so at some time it's like, for some reason, it seems like it's harder to sustain it, to use it as a sustainable strategy, because Milo is still on YouTube. Actually, some people don't know that, and he's got like 800,000 subs, but he doesn't have nearly as many as like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson. And Crowder's an exception, though. He's kind of an enigma because he is a provocateur. I think that part of it is, it's certainly the case that the more intellectual you are, you actually limit yourself to a degree. And that's why Crowder is bigger than Jordan Peterson, who's got a PhD in psychology and he's at Toronto, is that Crowder is not as much of an intellectual. If you're funny and you're goofy and your arguments, frankly, if your arguments become too rigorous, you're going to start losing people in terms of subscribers or followers, because they can't follow. Not everybody's able to follow, and not everybody has as much of an interest to follow, because it's hard work to think hard. So that's why some of the less rigorous thinkers are oftentimes some of the bigger influencers, I think.
If you look on the screen, more than one person has asked this, so I feel compelled to address it. But people are asking, well, basically, someone like me with 4 black belts, I've been a martial artist since I was 6 years old. I was teaching since age 15. So I'd like to know myself. Have you ever been in the ring? Have you ever fought competitively? Or they're talking about your steel jaw there, and you look like you can carry yourself.
That's kind of you to say. That's a really nice compliment. I never did any sort of formal competitive, like, Brazilian jiu-jitsu or anything like that. I have done like rolling around it. So I wrestled in high school, middle school, high school. That would be the closest to formal competitive. You could maybe like roughly that overlaps with MMA. And then I played college football, but after that I've done like some rolling around, like I think for 2 years I did judo. And I'm trying to remember what, I think it was second brown that I made it to. And Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I never made it to any belt, but I would enjoy going to like the gym here at my university before it closed. So I have a huge respect for pretty much any martial art, as well as wrestling. And that's impressive. You have 4 black belts. Really? Yes. What are they in? I'm curious.
Kopo Jutsu, which is a bone breaking and nerve pinching art. Ninjutsu, that's the one I was teaching at age 15. Kempo Karate, which was probably took the longest. It wasn't the hardest to get, but it took the longest to get, because there's a lot of katas and a lot of boxes you have to check. And Marine Corps martial arts program. The Marine Corps and the Army have their own martial arts now. So when the inception of the McMAP program, I just happened to be a drill instructor in San Diego at the time that it was just being formulated. So I got to actually help formulate it with Colonel George Bristol. And I was one of the very first people to make it to black belt in the system, and then go to Quantico for 6 weeks. And you get a red tab on your black belt, which means you can train, you can make instructors. And so that was so new back then. People would they thought I was out of uniform. They'd see a black belt with a red tab, like, where's your khaki belt? And, people didn't even know. And just getting in on the ground floor, that was pretty fun. And teaching all the new recruits that, they just signed the dotted line. And I'm the one teaching them, introducing them to McMap and training them for their first tan belt. It was a real honor. It was,
That is
really
so
rewarding.
cool.
But
Congrats.
I tell people, see, you've been exposed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have as well. Never got a belt in it. I tell people I would trade in all 4 of my black belts for just a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's how high I think of it.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that's super cool. But fascinating and impressive for black belts. And also, I wanted to say, Jim, thanks for having served. The fact that you're a veteran is both something that I was going to say, I want to say thank you for. And then also, I have to say, tying it to our topic, is that whenever I think of it, and I'm never like looking for a fight or anything, but I always, in my head, I think if if somebody was like going to try to fight me, I don't want to fight, but if I had to defend myself, I've got to defend myself. And I always think of it as like the things that I would be weary of would be both if people have past MMA experience or wrestling or Muay Thai or any sort of, but also if they have a military background. And so that's really cool and good for you on having both a military background as well as martial arts. That's awesome.
Thank you. I've got some very strong opinions on Afghanistan. I don't know if you're looking for upcoming debates, and they're not the opinions that you would guess from somebody who is a retired combat Marine. So
really,
yes.
Oh.
Ralph Ellis, who goes it's Jason Ellis, but I don't know why it's Ralph. I think that's his middle name. He's a friend of mine. He was in the Army. He's a soldier, and he says, "Oh yeah, they just call it combatives in the Army." So that's right. The Army does have their own martial arts system with belts now too. I'm not saying that they copied us, but we were first. And then it used to be called MACP. I didn't know that. Ours, before it was McMap, we did have an unarmed combat, very, very basal, very, what's the word? Almost primitive. There wasn't much to it, but it was called line training, and LINE stood for something. But when McMap came along, the Marine Corps in 1999, they finally realized, hey, a battlefield could come down to some unarmed conflicts, and it's usually going to be you against not just one person. So it didn't really address ground fighting much. In fact, being on the ground with an enemy in a combat theater is actually a huge liability, more so than normal, because he's got a buddy that's going to come up and bayonet you in the head if you don't get up quickly. So that's what it's geared towards.
You served as a Marine, which is even more impressive. Like, just because I always think of the Marines as having been the Marines as like just tough as nails, like the mental ability in terms of sticking with it. So that's really impressive, Jim.
Thank you. I feel the same. It's true. That is true. I will take that compliment. But someone that's got a graduate degree in any field, I feel the same way about that tenacity you're talking about, sticking to something. My co-host Courtney is in a master's program right now for psychology. She wants to be a sex therapist, and seeing the amount of work she's putting into getting her master's while she's planning for an upcoming wedding this fall, it's just, it seems, it makes me, it reminds me of some of the adversity that I went through, gearing up for combat and engaging in combat. And, a lot of the adversity, I think there's, I value tenacity out in the civilian sector as well.
That's kind of you. That's really cool.
And having a channel like yours, not giving up. How many channels, Christian or atheist, are just supernovas? They have high expectations, and if they don't meet those expectations within, say, a year, they just disappear. Some of these great channels that I love listening to and watching, and they're gone because they just didn't meet their goal, or they were a flash in the pan. And the vast majority of them are not out for longevity like yours or mine.
That's so true, Jim. I was just reading some empirical papers, so like some on Google Scholar. So right now I'm prepping for my comprehensive exam this fall. And I have to say something about that, Jim, because it's honestly one of the more helpful things I've ever read, I feel like, in psychology, like all the empirical literature. Now, most people know this already, and you've already alluded to it, so I know you know it, but it's good to remind ourselves of this, that there's something called, so originally Kahneman and Tversky from 1979, so if you know of the book Thinking Fast and Slow, that's like a popular, hugely popular book in psychology that is respected by scholars. And it summarizes a lot of the work by Kahneman and Tversky. But in 79, they had found that people tend to succumb to what's called the planning fallacy. Almost everything we do, we underestimate how long it'll take. And YouTube channels are a great example. Most people think, I'm going to become a YouTuber and I will, within a month or two or 3, I'll have 1,000 subscribers. And then, in a year, I'll have 10,000. And I'm like, that's possible. Some people do it, but it's pretty hard. And so usually people's expectations are much higher in terms of how fast they think anything will happen. Another example is like going to the gym. They think, I'll go exercise and I'm going to lose so much weight so fast. And when they don't see it, not surprisingly, they're discouraged and they give up. And so the long game, reminding yourself that like, this is the long game. Whatever you do, it's probably going to take way longer than you think. It's probably going to take, like, realistically, like 10 years until you're really crushing it. And that is just, so thanks for saying that about modern day debate. I've always tried to think of it as like, this is like, it's just a new lifestyle with YouTube. If you want to keep going with it, it's got to be a new lifestyle. It can't be like a temporary thing where you try it out and you expect big things, because it's like, it's almost always going to take longer than you think. And here's what's ironic. Even though we know that we've had these experiences, it's a fallacy that's interesting, because it's like one that it's so powerful that despite even remembering our own poor estimations of how long it would take to lose 10 pounds or how long it would take to get to 1,000 subscribers, we nonetheless, we just keep making the fallacy. It's really interesting. But anyway, I'm glad you said that. I think that's like one of the more, it's a very wise thing you said.
James Coons, you get $100,000 dropped in your lap today. All of it has to go towards the show. What equipment would you buy? What would you change? What would you do with it?
Let's see. I wouldn't change too much equipment. I've always been pretty slow about our tech. And so like last night was the first night I ever used an actual HD type of camera on myself. That was the first time ever last night. So I always thought, well, I'm only going to invest into like, fancier things. Like a Blue Yeti is like, $120 if I remember right. I thought I'll only invest in those things if I know I'm for sure really in this. And so long story short, if I could spend it instead on honorariums, I would shoot for the stars. Maybe even interestingly, like a podcaster recently tried to get, I don't remember the amount he offered. I think it was like $500,000. So maybe 100,000 wouldn't be enough, but you tried to get Trump and Obama to have a discussion to try to bring more, what's the word I'm looking for? Unity to the country. So I would shoot for an event like that, a big time type of thing that ideally be healing for the country too.
You said you strive for unity. A lot of your topics are controversial. Are there any topics in line with what you said? Are there any topics that you just won't platform at all? Anything, it's just too controversial?
Personally, no. And the reason that we won't host some, though, is because YouTube terms of service won't allow us. And you might think, well, but James, isn't it dangerous letting those views be, you could say, like argued for in the public sphere? And I would say there is, I think, a good answer to this empirically. Like there is, so if you look at the persuasion literature, there's research by, and this is a hugely respected model in persuasion. It's by Petty and Cacioppo. It's from 1984 or 1986 when they originally started talking about the elaboration likelihood model. Namely that what persuades people in the short term is different from what persuades people in the long term. Short term, it's true that people are in the moment more persuaded by things that are more peripheral relative to the argument. So, for example, how attractive is a speaker? How funny is a speaker? How charming is a speaker? Whatever. But in terms of you could say long-term belief change or attitude change, rigorous arguments are the thing that really make a difference in the long run. So in other words, the peripheral effects of a funny speaker or an attractive speaker, they wear off pretty fast, though they have this ephemeral presence, to concede that they wear off fast. And so when you have these people, you might be, so I mean, I would think, for example, if if people want to argue for violence or something, or some sort of society that is like pro-violence, I suspect the arguments against that would be better. And so I think in the long run, it would actually, according to the elaboration likelihood model, it would actually produce a greater good in the long run by assuming you, of course, like I said, you want someone, we try to be careful to make sure that the people who are opposing those with, we would say, quasi-dangerous beliefs and maybe even like fully dangerous beliefs, we want to make sure that the people opposing them are strong. And I think we've done a fine job of that. I think, for example, Destiny and Vosh, I think, did a great job against, I think it was Alsup and Stryker, two fellows that would be considered ALT right.
I like how you spell it out. You know what? I don't put it past YouTube's algorithm to demonetize it for saying that. Yes, so thank you. Jason Ellis had a question. People like Darth Dawkins, who I guess Jason believes is more just a provocateur. Do you feel like you give him too much time, or people like him? Do you give him too much time, and are you almost hamstringing yourself by having someone like him on?
Good question. I'm glad that it's asked. Just to be sure that I understand, do they mean too much time in the sense that like we have him on as a guest for too much?
Too much airtime, I'm guessing. Too much airtime.
Okay, so I think that means like why have him on as often as we do is
I believe so.
Darth, was that what it was?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I do think that Darth can sometimes be. I think maybe the way he behaves on Discord might be different from modern day debate. I don't know. Like I have seen some videos in which he becomes like abusive, where he'll tell people like, "Shut up, I'm talking." I don't know if he's ever been, and I might be wrong. So if someone wants to send me like what's it called, a timestamp to a video on modern day debate where Darth was that bad, I'm open to it. I do know that he'll like, Darth has a provocative style, but I'm not sure frankly, I don't know what the problem is of hosting Darth if he's not abusive. And so I think that he said, like, I give him more time or less restrictions. I'm not sure if that's the case in terms of like, we haven't had him on that much. I mean, we certainly had Tom Jump on probably like 3 times as much as Darth. And so, but if they're talking about like, well, Darth is much more, he can be much more nasty than Tom. And so that's something that, again, like if they have timestamps of where, like, sometimes I have to be honest, like sometimes I don't understand why people get angry at some speakers, whether they be atheist or Christian. Sometimes I don't understand why they're so bothered by them. So that's just what I would say.
Oh, I accidentally put the wrong one up. He follow question. So someone like Darth Dawkins, who Jason believes is just a troll, why is he granted so much? I think you answered that. So much banter or rage time. Why isn't he cut off earlier? And you know what? That's I don't want to say, Jason, I'm not saying it's nitpicking, but I can see how a host sometimes there are some hosts that just don't moderate at all, and they let them go way at each other's throats. That's what a host is for, is to get in there and try to keep the topic on track. Second is to try to keep things at an amicable level to where some productivity can be made.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So I don't know if we do give. I'm open to, like, if people have done like an analysis, like a time analysis, I'm open to if they showed me like, look, this is how many minutes that this person talked. At the same time, I think a part of it too, and is something that it's hard for me to like enforce, is some people they have different personalities. So for example, like one of the subfacets of the personality trait of extroversion is dominance. People who are more extroverted generally, if they correlate at least, they will be more socially, they'll talk more, and they'll assert themselves more. And some people are so on the opposite side that it's like it's hard to tell that they want to say anything. And Darth is one of those hyper assertive people, such that if I don't give if I don't give the opponent enough time to respond, that's something I would agree is, like if Darth keeps badgering them and dominating the time, I agree that's bad. And I'm open to the fact that I've got things I can improve on as a moderator.
You are a devout, outspoken follower of Christ. When you first started the show, do you feel like starting a show like this was some sort of calling? I forget where it is in the Bible, the Great Commission, where in the Bible it specifically calls Christians to reach out to non-believers, right? Did you feel like this was your calling, that you felt compelled on high to start this channel?
Maybe in the broad sense that I've always been drawn to like the apologetics debate world. I have to be honest that it probably wasn't that as much. My hope is that if I am a legitimate, like if I'm truly living out the values of Jesus, that my hope is that people would be, like more open to Christianity as a result, and you could say like more drawn to Christ. At the same time, I got to be honest that the reason that I started Modern Day Debate was more so because I was concerned with, I wanted to be sure that everybody had a fair shot to make their case. And so I noticed there were some channels that I thought the moderator was too involved. And I don't have any like people do, they have different purposes for their moderation. So I wouldn't say that they were doing that they were bad moderators as much as I would say they're bad moderators for the purpose I have in mind. For the purpose they have in mind, it might be different, in which case maybe their moderating is spot on, in which case like it's hard to criticize it, right? They have a different goal. But for us, I was concerned that sometimes, and it could be either side, I thought sometimes moderators on certain channels would jump in and almost gang up on some of the guests. And so for me, that was the biggest concern. And the other thing I thought of was that I'm amazed that sometimes channels, they don't link their guests. And I understand if it's like they're a day late or something like that, that's totally fine. Like they had the intention, but they forgot. But what I found is that back then, it was almost as if when I would go on debate channels, because I used to do it myself, I would have to like kind of like press them and say, would you be so kind to put my link in the description? And I would have to like press them because I feel like debaters weren't, it wasn't like, things weren't as like good to debaters back then, in the sense of like, the other thing too is we tell people, if you come on the show, like you can live stream it at the same time, or you can upload it immediately after. That's totally cool with us. And I don't think it's like bad for people to have rules about that. But I always thought, I was like, well, like if I'm the debater, I'm in the hot seat. And so why is it that this channel says I have to wait 3 days to upload the debate that I was in on their channel? And so those are things, those are more of the concerns that I had.
We have about 15 minutes left. I want to give you as much time as possible to answer the last question that we ask all our guests that come on the show. And we tailor this question based on if you're a believer or non-believer. So here's your version of the question. If there was irrefutable proof to right now, right this second, no more debate, the debate's over, the God of the Old and New Testament, Yahweh, doesn't exist. Everyone knows it. There's no denying it. He's pure, a work of pure fiction, and there's no more talk. There's no more debating about it. How would this change your life immediately? What would you do differently? Would you still run the channel? How would you have to change it up? How would you live your life differently?
Great question. That's fun. I would definitely, the channel would be completely the same. I know that I put in the description, and rarely, it's like once ever that anyone's complained about it. I think I put something like, I'm a Christian. If you ever have a hard day and you want someone to talk to or to pray for you, like, let me know. My email is moderndaydebate@gmail. That I probably wouldn't have there anymore if I'm not a Christian. In which case, that would be the only difference. Otherwise, the channel would be exactly the same. And my personal life would be different because, I mean, even Paul himself, I think it's First Corinthians, maybe, where Paul says, like, if it's not true, we're a bunch of dummies. We'd be dumb and wasting our lives, like, to believe in the resurrection if it didn't happen. So I think Scripture would tell me to not believe. I think that the only reason that I would, kind of at that point maybe still kind of like almost try to believe, although I don't think I probably would follow through with it, is you could say that kind of like that there are, you could say, utility reasons for believing. So, for example, we do see that, let's see, there are empirical papers. So if somebody wanted to see these, like, I'm not trying to, it's like some people are stirred up by this. There is some data to suggest that people who are more intrinsically involved in, you could say, intrinsically engaged with their faith are happier. And extrinsically, so intrinsically would mean like you believe in God in and of, for God's own purpose, for pursuing God in and of that purpose. Extrinsic religiosity would be like, I go to church because I think it helps boost my social standing in my community. That's not associated with happiness. In fact, it's actually, interestingly, so intrinsic religiosity, the more of it a person is engaging in, you could say, that the happier they are. Now, extrinsic religiosity, the more engaged with it, the less happy they are. So intrinsic religiosity would be nice to hold on to. The ironic thing about it, and the reason that I don't think I would remain a Christian, is because if you're remaining a Christian because of these utility type reasons, namely because you think it'll make you happier, or because of maybe for whatever other utility type reasons, well, that sounds extrinsic if you think about it, right? Because it's like, well, is it because it's for its own purpose, or because you can get kind of this psychological happiness boost as a result of it? In which case, it sounds now it's become extrinsic anyway. And so I think I would just throw in the towel completely.
That is maybe the most interesting response to that question I've heard. I've heard pretty much everything too. That is incredible. As an evangelist, you correct me if I'm wrong, you still seek to evangelize. Does that get in the way? Is there a contradiction there? Not a contradiction. What's it called? Do you feel biased as a moderator when the debate that you're hosting is of a theological nature? And are you still subconsciously rooting or giving special allowances to the believer in the debate? Do you feel biased?
That could be. I think it's certainly possible. And, maybe, let's see. I don't deny it's there, because maybe it is. At the same time, there's also, like, I do have it in the back of my mind that is a possible reality. And so I almost feel like maybe I'm trying to protect against it. There might be a part of me in my subconscious that's like trying to make, that's trying to like almost be in favor of the opposing side to try to like compensate for my potential bias. And so I'm open to the fact that I might be, in fact, I would say it has to be the case that I have some biases because I'm human. And I think a lot of times people don't realize, like, if you're human, like, welcome to the bias club. Like, you've got plenty of biases. Let's see. I mean, we do have, so it's hard to tell. I mean, it's hard to know what metric I should use to try to evaluate whether or not that's happening. Because it's like, for example, we have like 85% of our viewers are atheist, and I'm happy for it to be the case. And I don't feel compelled for it to be 50-50, like theist versus atheist. It doesn't bother me. I don't feel like it's like lopsided or wrong for being that way. But it's like, well, is it because they enjoy the channel? But it's like, also, I think it's probably the case that atheists are probably more represented in the debate sphere on YouTube as well. I think Christians just maybe aren't as interested in the debate sphere. And so maybe that's why rather than it being that I have fair moderating, maybe it's just that, like, well, there are just more atheists in the debate. That's why you have more atheist viewers. So it's hard to tell, but I don't deny it. And in fact, I would say that I do think I have biases, and it's good for the audience to challenge me on it so that I can self-examine and try to make changes where there might be changes needed.
I don't even know what he's asking here. Is there a
This is true.
backstory to this?
There is, yeah. So when I was, this is the only, and I'm not joking, it sounds like it's made up. It sounds like it has to be made up. And if someone told me that it happened, that their roommate tried to kill them, I would think they're making things up because it just seems so rare. But I really like, so I'm like, I am well aware of the fact that if anybody else said it, I would think that they were full of it. So I don't blame if people don't believe me, but I'll tell you the story and you can let me know. Because some people, they're like, yeah, it seems like that's the case. When I was first starting my doctorate here, I went on Craigslist to find a living situation that would be frugal. And I found it was consistent with past work I had done in group homes with people with different sorts of mental kind of challenges or issues, such that there was a lady who was looking for a kind of a person who would be there at night to kind of support or be available for her son who is schizophrenic. And so I was like, hey, I've worked with schizophrenic people in the past at a group home, and as well as people with different other disorders. And I said, I'd be happy to try this out. And so, by the way, I want to be clear that just because a person is schizophrenic doesn't mean they're more violent. Like, there's research that's been done on this. But nonetheless, I moved in, and the fellow that I lived with and that I was there for at night, if he needed anything, he would ask. We got along well, I thought, but then I think he didn't like me, and he started doing strange things that I think he was trying to get under my skin. I don't think he wanted me to live there. So he would purposely like take a big bite out of my sub sandwich that I would keep in the fridge, and then he'd like leave it out on the table just as like, and it was like, well, maybe he doesn't, maybe he doesn't realize what he's doing. That could be. But there were things where he seemed to not want me there. And what happened eventually was there were other like little things, but here's where the climax of the story is. He wanted to make a burrito at 10 at night, which is totally cool. Like, that's fair game. But his mom told me because he was sick that I shouldn't let him have a burrito before bed because he might throw it up. And if I'm asleep, the puke is going to sit in the carpet and nobody will be able to clean it up. So she said, just don't let him have something before bed. Just try to have, give him some 7-Up or water. And he wanted to have the burrito. And I said, hey, I'm so sorry, but your mom told me just in case you throw up, because he wasn't the type of person that would clean it up if he threw up. Like I said, he would leave the sub sandwiches out on the kitchen table and things like that. But he insisted, and I said, hey, I'm really sorry. I hate to do this, but I unplugged the, what's the word I'm looking for? The cooker for the burrito. And what happened was he got upset and he went to his room, and I thought it was going to be okay. And I said, I'm so sorry to do that to you, buddy. But your mom had specifically told me that to do this, to not let you have a burrito before bed. He went to sleep, and then I woke up I think it was 1:30 in the morning, and it smelled funny in the house. It smelled like gas. And I was like, that's, so I got up out of my bed and I went to the kitchen and I looked at the oven, and this is an older oven. So I don't know how much would be burned off by a pilot light or how much would fill the apartment, but I know I smelled gas. And the one of the burners, which was turned on just enough so that gas would be released, but that the burner wouldn't be flipped. So in other words, it looked like there was actually gas being released. And there was, and he wasn't in the apartment now, so he had left. And so I went out looking for him, thinking maybe this is a coincidence. He was, maybe he was mad, but unrelatedly, he bumped into the burner switch and turned it on just enough. And then he happened to go for a walk. And I found him he usually would go to Walmart. So I found him, and this is so by now it's like 2:30 in the morning after I found him. We go back to the apartment and we make sure it's aired out. Then, let's see. I start packing my stuff because I'm thinking I'm suspicious at this point. And there were other issues that he just didn't seem to want me to live there. So I thought, I don't think I'm going to live here. I'm just going to make it easier for him and move out. And what happened was his mom, by 7 a.m, she's finally awake and she's like, hey, like, what are you worried about? And I was like, well, I got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried that maybe he purposely did this. And she said, so she was like, I don't know what are you worried about something that Chris said? And Chris was the staff worker that would come during the day and spend time with the fellow that I would spend time with. And what would happen was, I said, well, what did Chris say? And she said, nothing. And I was like, wait, well, for real, what did Chris say? And she said, well, Chris said that so-and-so, the gentleman that was schizophrenia that I lived with, she said, Chris said that he, so-and-so, had talked about gassing the apartment. And I was like, okay, there's no way this is a coincidence. There's no way. It has to be. And so, long story short, I moved out. I had friends from church came by and they helped pick up all my stuff. And I was out within like 2 or 3 hours. Everything was out. And I am pretty sure he tried to kill me. And I have no hard feelings because I don't think he knew any better. I don't think he was in the right state of mind. But that was the only roommate I know of, at least, that tried to kill me. So I don't know. Does that sound like? I mean, I feel like when you talked about gassing the apartment. But anyway, what do you think, Jim?
From my limited knowledge on it, it sounds like you're spot on. Maybe it was direct, overt sabotage. I don't know, but damn, that's crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. James, I have to answer a few things. We got a super chat. Jason Bourne McCrae says you guys are dishonest. Is that true? Well, first off, I don't know. Well, 3 things. 1, I don't know if everyone's aware of my current relationship with Steve McCrae, Sweet Heathen, and Cheshire Vic. If you are not, good on you. Congratulations. Which leads me to number 2. I don't engage in drama anymore. I only talk about facts. And number 3, and most importantly, to answer your question, I appeal to the public. If you think I'm being dishonest, tell me. If you think I'm being honest, tell me. I will state some facts, not to perpetuate drama, but it is them that unfriended me on all social media platforms. It's me that wants to continue a friendly relationship with them in the future. As to whether that happens or not, it remains unseen. But take that for what you will. Second thing, someone else had, Factitionalist Network. I have been on Modern Day Debate. Well, no, actually, I have not been on I was on Modern Day Hysteria back in its early days. So yeah, earlier on in the conversation, I don't know if you're aware of it, Kaz from Factitionalist Network. We did talk about early at the top of the show about James. I offered, if you haven't had any discussions on what's going on in Afghanistan or in the bigger picture about our involvement in foreign wars, and would like to engage that, then I might be, and I might not have the opinion that you would expect from a 21-year Marine combat veteran. So that might be interesting. What else? I think that's it. Okay. James Coons, we know where to find you. It's in the description section. Modern Day Debate, rising star in the YouTube community. Where else can we find you on social media? Where else are you active? And what upcoming events do you have planned for the future?
We do have a podcast, which is exciting because it was about a year ago, I started uploading them and I wasn't sure if people would use it, but the podcast has been well received, which is encouraging. And I would highly encourage people, if you enjoy debates, Modern Day Debate is available on every podcast app. So that's something that I'm excited about. And then we're also on Twitch and Twitter. And upcoming debates, there are a couple right now that politically would be absolutely epic. I can't say them for sure as being for sure things yet. So sometimes they're like up in the air and I can't say names of people. But I'm telling you that by the end of this month or so, maybe in the next couple of weeks, we are expecting to have a couple big political ones that I'm excited about. And then we're probably going to start picking up on more streams this September and October, because the summer we've been a little bit behind because I've had like personal things that I've been catching up on, and now I feel like I'm rededicating my time more to modern day debate. So we should have more shows as well, which is exciting. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Jim. Seriously, I always enjoy talking to you, and thanks for your flexibility in terms of my like requesting Sunday morning, as well as my flexibility in terms of like last time not coming in. And it's like I feel like I should enjoy theology more, but for some reason apologetics I can get more into, and I'd be open to coming back and discussing like more apologetics. I'd probably have to do some prep, so it might be better if it was like winter break, if it was like a full-on topic, like anything like a debate or something. But thank you, Jim, for real. I really do appreciate it.
You mentioned that. I'm going to just backstory just for the people who are unaware. We had planned this originally, and I'm going to put all the fault on my side of the table. Sometimes originally, because I went back and looked when I asked you to come on the show, and it was topic X, and it was going to be one-on-one. But sometimes in the course of prepping for this, the shows gain a life of their own. And before I knew it, it was going to be a 6-person panel on a topic that we had not agreed on. And I know I do this a lot, and you were the first person to call me on it, which I thank you for. I need to stick with what was originally agreed upon, because prior to you, people just roll with it, and they might feel uncomfortable, and I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. So from here on out, so I thank you for reminding me I need to stick with what was originally agreed upon and not change the format or the topics of the show. And I know to you it felt like I was trying to pull a fast one, and I think now you know I was not.
I trust you, and I appreciate you being so patient with my, like, sometimes, what's the word I'm looking for? It comes off as like, sometimes it can be less than tactful maybe, or like less than socially smooth. So I appreciate you understanding that I wasn't trying to be a jerk, and that, yeah, it's just that for some reason theology, I just don't get as engaged by it as much. And so long story short, like psychology, I get a kick out of. Like I love talking about psychology, but anyway, I hope you know, like, you didn't do anything wrong. And so I appreciate you being so humble about it, and no worries at all. Like I said, I felt bad because I was like, maybe I should have, I got to tough it out. And so thanks for being so flexible for me. So I appreciate it.
So in addition to me asking if, I guess Afghanistan would probably be the most topical to come on your show myself. But remember that my co-host Courtney Stewart is a psychologist. She's working on her master's degree now. So keep Courtney Stewart in mind for maybe an upcoming show. If you like the psychology, she might entertain some sort of informal debate on your show.
Oh, that's rad.
Yeah. Okay. People don't want you to leave, James. This is a good thing. You've got to tell your backpacking sofa surfing story now. We're
funny.
trying to wrap this show up, but they just love you.
This is the last story I could tell. Then I've got to run. But it's a fun story. So what happened was, I think they're talking about, yeah. So I used to do couch surfing, which is like Airbnb, except it's just like, it's more about the experience with the host, like spending time with the people who host you. So like you don't pay, but it's expected that you're like going to spend time with the host, and you kind of develop a friendship, and they're just happy to get to host somebody. And it's a great experience. And what happened was, Usman was a nice fellow that at the time, in my profile, because I was, especially because I was on staff with FCA, so Fellowship of Christian Athletes, I had put that I only preferred to host men, and that I wasn't interested in like staying at a woman's place or hosting a woman, because if it was basically to avoid any appearance of being some sort of player, or something like that, I didn't want to have like women coming in and out of my apartment. And so I figured if it was guys, people would probably assume it was like my college buddies or something. Long story short, Usman was like, hey, I was traveling through Houston. I was like, I'm looking for a spot. And by the way, I used to live in Texas, so I love your background. And I was traveling through Houston, and Usman, I reached out to him. I was like, hey, do you have a spot where I could stay? Could I stay there on your couch? And he's like, oh yeah, like you can come. and he was really friendly, and we're still friends on Facebook, and he's a great guy. Like I enjoy him. What happened was, so we're getting ready for bed, and let's see. Usually couch surfing, you sleep on the couch, and in this case, I was okay with it. He's like, "Oh yeah, like you'll sleep in my room," and I was like, "Okay, like no problemo." And there was like a pallet on the floor, so it wasn't like I was sleeping in the same bed with him. And when I came into the room, though, like he had his shirt off, and I was like, "Ah, it's like normal. A lot of people sleep with their shirt off," so I thought nothing of it. And then, but he starts the conversation as I'm sleeping on this laying on this pallet, and he's like, "Oh, you look kind of old for your age." And I've always looked old for my age, and it doesn't bother me. So I was like, "Oh, I was like, it's true." And trying to be humorous, a sad attempt at humor, I said, "Well, but business is still going okay with the ladies," which isn't true anyway. But anyway, but the point is, I was just trying to like tactfully, like receive the feedback. And so he said, "Oh, that's probably because you have such a hot body." And I was like, "Oh no." I just realized it finally clicked that what happened was Usman, we were having this conversation, and it was like kind of the point where I was like, "Okay, thank you." And I said, so this is just me and him in his room. It's like 1 a.m, and I'm uncomfortable thinking like, "Oh my, what have I accidentally implied?" And he's like, we're talking about it, and I said, "Yeah." I was like, "But anyway, I'm like trying to be chaste. Like I want to save sexual activity for marriage," or and so he said like, "Oh, that must be hard, because if you're having a conversation like this, it could probably turn you on." And I was like, "Nope, not turned on over here." And I realized, I was like, it was just too obvious where I said, I was like, I'm, just, I was like, I think he brought it up himself. He said, "Is there a reason why your profile says you only want to host men?" And I was like, I explained the reason I gave, and he said, "Oh, because that's usually like a dog whistle to say that you're gay and you're looking for a gay guy." And I was like, "Oh boy, I had no idea." And so it was like clear what Usman was interested in, and I wanting to be polite and not wanting to. I had slept at Big Bend the last like 4 nights or something, so I was like sleep deprived already. And I said, I could have put it more tactfully, but I just didn't know. The only way you can know for sure is if you just frankly ask. So I just said, "Anyway, it's like I'm probably gonna go to sleep, but I don't have to worry about you doing anything to me while I'm asleep, do I?" And I was just like, I felt bad for asking, but you have to. I mean, like that way, there's like a clear expectation. So, and he's like, "Oh, no worries about that." And I went to sleep, and I think it was like 2 hours later, it must have been, I heard this like rustling noise, like something. It almost sounded like the blinds, like hanging blinds, like were like moving or something. And I thought, it was like, is the window open? Is the wind blowing them? And I was facing the wall when I woke up, and so I'm like looking at the wall, and I can see I look up to the blinds, they're not moving, and I'm thinking like, "Oh no, what's this noise?" And so I like roll over just to see, and standing over me, breathing really heavily, Usman is there, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And okay, I made that last part up. So that last part I didn't. No, but I slept till morning. The rest of it was true, and nothing happened that I know of. And so long, but he's a good guy. He would never do that. So, but that was the story of where I found myself in a situation that I didn't expect. But yes, that's the couch surfing story I think they're referring to.
Full disclosure, when you first started this story, I was thinking the same thing. I can totally see how someone might have gotten the wrong idea of putting I host men only. Yeah,
Right.
I know
Yeah.
you're heterosexual, but the thought did cross my mind even so.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah, but I
it
can
kind
see
of
your
was.
reasoning also. It's commendable, you know, that you don't want to put out any false, you know, ideas about, having a woman over, the optics of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people would think that's conservative or too conservative in terms of like But for me to avoid any sort of drama or any sort of, I'm a very like, my whole philosophy in life, and same thing in the department, because once in a while there's drama in my PhD program, is like I'm very anti-drama. Any sort of misperceived anything, I try to avoid. And but yeah.
The chat is blowing up with more. You know what? We got to cut it off right here. There's more people that want you to talk about other. You've got stories, James. Holy crap! But we got to end it right here. You got to get going. Thank you so much. And in line with that, we've had before the pandemic, once a month at least, Courtney and I would have an in-person recording session, and we're going to start that back up eventually. We'll see. This fourth wave, when it dies down and everyone gets their third vaccination, maybe we'll play it by ear. But we want to start having in-person recording, in-studio recording sessions where people. This is great. I like people sitting right next to me. I think it lends to a better discussion sometimes. And sitting around the table, 6-man, right here in person. 3 Christians, 3 atheists, something like that. We used to do that all the time. In this house, we've had. Everyone you go back and look at the shows, Matt Dillahunty, R.N. Raw, Richard Carrier stayed on our couch for 3 days when he came through town. Holy Kool-Aid. So that we want to get back into that. If you say you travel a lot, you went through Houston, if you come through Dallas-Fort Worth, give us some advance warning. So we will schedule our recording session around you. It's a 12-hour recording session. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. Or you can, or you don't have to be a part of it for the whole thing, but we record enough in one day to last the entire month. We edit it. And so that I extend that invitation to you if you're ever through Dallas-Fort Worth.
That would be fun. I appreciate that. I'll let you know, because I do plan on being there in the new year. So that would seriously be a blast.
Awesome. Okay, James Kuntz, you know where to find him in the description section. Modern Day Debate, congratulations on the success of your channel. And do you have any final thoughts before we leave?
Thanks for your kind words. And like I said, all credit to all of the speakers and the guests and the everybody that, like, you could say, the audience. And so thank you for having me on. Seriously, I really enjoy this time. This is great. It's just honestly, I'm so happy and thankful that we got to have this conversation. So thanks so much.
Me as well. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.